Spectrum Voices Conversation is an autistic association production for autistic radio. We speak, our words, we listen. The authentic voices of the autistic community, conversations around autism.
This is Spectrum Voices Conversation, 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. UK time, every Sunday, and 1 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is the Facebook part of the broadcast. The first one I've shared, starting from today, 3 hours ago, is from Viv Dawes, autistic advocate, a writer, and describes himself as an autistic lived experience advocate, writer, and trainer. And what she shared was, many parents ask me what my son embraced being autistic, which has ultimately changed his life. I am clear in this one. It was when I started to accept that I was autistic too, and started to identify as autistic, and started to peel off my masks, and managed to get a diagnosis, but I know this isn't always possible. If your child is autistic, you're divergent also.
Not entirely. It's not an absolute given, is it?
No, that's right. No. There's odds. Look at the odds, but
yeah,
there's plenty of when it's just not.
I think it's just, we've had a good few of these similar posts that it's if your child's autistic, you may be as well, usually. And it's usually from someone that's just been diagnosed or just recently identified as autistic and divergent. So but it's important to say that this isn't always the case, but as you say, the odds change. My parents aren't autistic. My siblings aren't autistic either. I'm the only autistic person in the family.
You know, there's a strong connection between different members of the family, so it's always something to think about. I wouldn't have put it quite in those as stronger terms as she's putting it, but it's still a thing, isn't it?
I think it's one of the things that there are sort of two main themes I see in adult diagnosis is crisis. So mental health crisis, everything's gone to shit. What's going on? And a therapist somewhere says, have you considered you might be autistic? And the other one is a child, so someone's own child or another child in the family is diagnosed. And so the family starts to learn a bit more about what autism is. And the information now is vastly different from what they might have read about 10, 15 years ago. And they start to realise, oh, hang on, I do that too. And whereas in the past you might have thought, oh, well, then I could also be autistic. So I think the narrative changes a little bit. Not narrative, the idea of stereotypes, those are starting to change. I think people are a bit more open to the idea that they might also be autistic. So there's definitely a hereditary component, but it's not a given. It's absolutely not a given. If you went on the science, then my brother should be autistic as well, because it's much more likely that the younger child will be autistic than the older child, and he's younger than me and not autistic. But it's an interesting aspect of it, and something worth having out there, I think, even if it just helps somebody recognise it in themselves.
I like the concept of autism adjacent as well. That kind of, this will make people think that I'm saying we're a little bit autistic, and I'm not saying, but I'm saying that the criteria for autism are medically decided, and they're thresholds of different behaviours, a lot of communication behaviours. So you might say that familial differences mean that members of the same family, even though they don't cross that threshold for an autism diagnosis, they're still akin to the person who does get the diagnosis. So there's always something to look into,
Well, there is actually something called the broader autism phenotype, which is unfortunately the only way I can think of to describe it right now is someone being a little bit autistic, and that's really terrible way of describing it. Autism adjacent, a kind of shades of neurodivergence, but not. And that's the thing about a diagnosis. It's a collection of traits or a collection of symptoms, if you want to use the medical term, that cross a certain threshold.
This autistic spectrum shows there needs to be less help boxes. And my mother was never thought of as autistic. So on my father's side, I would see at times when she was certainly more socialized. But her strong shyness and introversion sound like features in her.
It's also a bit about who owns the identity. I strongly feel that it shouldn't be up to the medical field to own the identity, and that people should be allowed to self-identify and not necessarily get themselves a diagnosis.
Yeah, using common sense grounds and self-description. Do it based on features, not just arbitrary, but yes.
I noticed that there's some rather nice fireworks in the background for somebody, something I'm missing over here. And then there's next posters about fireworks.
Yes, it certainly is, deliberately so. Came up right enough, but deliberately on Autism Oxford UK mental health service. And what they shared was, and it's a good thing to start with, it's talk about autism-friendly firework night. And it's kind of ideas or indicators of how to help children or people, older people with autism, during the experience, if you're going to watch fireworks or you're experiencing it around you. So what they say is cover ears, using ear defenders or noise cancelling headphones, which may help to block out the loud noises, which I feel I'm doing right now with headphones for the broadcast. Plan ahead, write the plan and explain the events to your child so they know what to expect. Virtual fireworks. If real fireworks are too much, try watching them online. This also means you can control the noise level. I can identify with that. Not particularly in fireworks, but particularly in noise in terms of music, etc. And safety. Ensure you explain safety guidelines to your child so that they're aware of the dangers. So it's sensory tips. And I can totally identify with it. I can totally identify with the sensory part. I feel myself, as I got older, loud noises or noises of any kind, I'm getting more sensitive to it. So as each year goes by, fireworks annoy me more than they ever had before. And because you can't predict when someone's going to use them and how long they're going to go off for and all that, it's a quite surreal experience. Although I do have ways of dealing with it. I usually listen to YouTube and my laptop on earphones anyway, so it's not that bad really. But because of the way the area is kind of structured out, there's always a hell of an echo, depending where the fireworks are getting off. So I just thought I'd bring this up, considering it's kind of sensory related.
I'm looking forward to the day when they take the bang out of the fireworks, because they don't need to make any noise. Like, you can still have all of the pretty colours and all of that without the noise. Maybe one day.
There's just everyone excited, capture the moment it goes off, I think.
I love them. The sensory experience of fireworks is something that blows my mind. I agree that the bangs are often excessive, but a little bit of popping and things does give that kind of drama to the things. If it's old-fashioned fireworks rather than the real huge things they have now. But staring up into the sky and losing my mind in that sort of psychedelic colours of all of the different is one of the things that I really love about being autistic.
The autistic joy, the sensory joy. Yeah.
Sensory joy. Yeah, it's momentary and it can be annoying. I know I agree with everything that is said other than that, but I'm one of those people that get a kick out of it.
Yeah, I know what you mean with the crackling and the popping, the kind of almost onomatopoeic sounds. I quite like those, but the really loud ear-splitting bangs can be a bit much after a while. And bearing in mind, lots of firework displays are put on outside, just so they could turn it down a little bit to protect everyone's ears. But yeah, no, it's part of it, isn't it?
Those of us that are not in the UK, around the world, fireworks night is November the 5th, and what we do is we celebrate the appalling
capital punishment of a Catholic terrorist who tried to take the British Parliament down and kill the King at the same time with gunpowder and a bomb underneath our Houses of Parliament.
I think a lot of them sort of celebrate his intention, in fact.
Of course they do, yeah. Anybody to bring down the politicians is often a folk hero.
Yeah, it's celebrated differently, and some people just celebrate it because it's just, they don't even, it's not in their mind at all. It's just something that happens, and they embrace it in terms of, well, I'll get involved with it. Moving on to the next one, it's from Neurodivergent Girl. It's a personal blog, happily married mama of 2 neurodivergent boys, diagnosed ADHD, autistic, BPD. This is a safe space. And what they've shared is a quote from, I think it's a poet, Caelan Dion. And basically what it says is, my authenticity matters more than your opinion of me. Be true of yourself, really.
Shows the need to back up and reliable to each other to help bring us about.
I can read that as sort of self-affirming, that somebody is saying that they're brave enough to express themselves authentically to themselves, irrespective of people's opinion. However, it's by a poet, and it kind of is a slap in the face. It's kind of saying, it's kind of pushback in take me or leave me, I'll be rude if I like, that kind of thing as well. So it could be misinterpreted, I suppose.
That's a good point, actually. Because I've met a lot of people like that. It can be very offensive. And this is the way I am. If you don't like me, this is, tough. So, yep. It can be taken that way, and understandably so. But what I like about it's a very strong quote to be taken either way, and very short. That's what I like about sharing these. It's just like it can create a conversation, and if not a conversation, it certainly creates a thought and a feeling. The next one is from Autistic and Living the Dream. It's a blog, and it's someone sharing their experiences as autistic, ADHD, OCD, queer person living in the UK, they, them. And what they're promoting, I'll just read out the post. It says, in case you missed it, myself and this page are very queer. Throughout Transgender Awareness Month, I'll be sharing my own experience as a gender-diverse autistic person, sharing from other trans plus pages, and resharing some of my blog posts on gender diversity, which there are many. If I have the time and energy, I'll probably write and create more trans plus content. Anyway, some fab trans plus and allies pages to follow if you don't already. Please feel free to share more in the comments. So what they've shared is the pages Trans Pride Portsmouth, Trans Ace Switch Queer NB Neurodivergent Disaster, Neurodiver Queers, Aim for the Rainbow, and NT in an ND World.
Sharing that post and supporting a group of people who at the moment are under enormous adverse pressure and publicity from the right-wing press and all kinds of keyboard warriors and nasty people generally. And then I look at the post, and it's a nice, gentle, fun, fab, the words it uses, it's a nice thing.
Absolutely. I mean, I've seen other posts from this person, and a lot of it is posts, it's like defending themselves all the time, and come out with statements like, it's like people are making comments, like Facebook can be quite bad for that. People making comments and hurtful comments, hatred comments. So it's nice to see that there's a network out there that fights against all that, because it must be very difficult for many people, many autistic people in that position.
I've always had a very positive experience of trans people. I found them gentle, often intelligent and feisty sometimes. But yeah, I've always found people who've had to deal with such a big deal, a big thing, nice people to be around. I had an interesting experience with a person on an Indian train. Sometimes when you're sitting on a train, you get various people come on and ask you for money and things. And there's a term for people who are transgender over here. There's kind of an accepted community of them. And this person came on the train, and my wife was very amused because they engaged with her in a kind of pecking way, pecking her hand, pecking her shoulder, kind of, come on, give me a bit of money, come on. You know that we need to support ourselves, and this is the only way we do it. Come on. And it was kind of amusing and kind of sweet. It was kind of nice. Very different from some of the other, needy people that are making their living from asking for money. Kind of entertainment in it.
Yeah. What I like about, campaigns, I'm not saying campaigns, but things like this, topics like this, people discussions like this, is it promotes individuality, and it's looking to break this sort of kind of stereotype that you must be one thing or another, or you're not just one thing or another, but in terms of you've got to be this stereotype and live by it. And sometimes even the autistic stereotype, which is usually when somebody thinks of someone autistic, they're thinking of, a male anyway. And it's just good. This sort of thing kind of reminds you there's so many different people out there celebrating the individual and trying to bat away all this nonsensical hate and and if it's not hatred, it's kind of defensive resistance, because I just think it's a great thing. And, I really enjoy reading and sharing such things like that. The next one is from Life Through My Lens. And this is a personal blog, an autistic disability advocate who advocates for neuro-inclusion, amplifies neurodivergent voices. It's Sarah Dewan, I think the name is. And they've just shared basically kind of another, not a quote, but basically a number of statements, personal statements, which we can identify with. I am autistic, not broken. I do not have special needs. I have human needs. I do not need to be cured because being autistic does not equate to having an illness. I do not have a lack of facial expressions. I do not need to smile more. This is just my face. My social communication is not deficient. I communicate artistically, which is valid and valuable. My interests are not repetitive and restricted. They are my passions and that drive me every day. These apparent deficits are ways in which I diverge from society deems as normal. However, there is no one right way to exist. There is nothing wrong with being autistic. When you discuss autism, you are in fact discussing autistic people. The words you use to describe us directly impact our mental health and well-being. It's time to move away from the notion of neuronormativity and adopt paradigm. And then it says, for anyone interested in moving forward, the neurodiversity, can't even pronounce that word. I highly recommend, it's an essay from Dr. Nick Walker, Throw Away the Master Tools.
Neuroqueer, the writings of Dr. Nick Walker. Throw away the master tools, liberating ourselves from the pathology paradigm.
So, is that what it means, paradigm, right?
Yeah, it's a funny word to pronounce. I think people say it in different ways.
It's just because of the way it's spelled.
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah, paradigm. Yeah, It's quite a long piece.
It was actually longer than I thought it was, because I actually thought it was just the things it was saying at first. I didn't realise the bottom. So,
Yeah.
Are you talking about the essay itself?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, but
right, sorry.
It's also from neuroqueer.com. So there's a link with November, isn't there? I'm having a little scan of it, and I think it's quite an interesting. I'm going to come back and read that through because that's quite an interesting thing. And the site seems quite interesting as well. The writings of Dr. Nick Walker, home, books, essays, video, comic, academia, contact pages. I think it's quite nice that this person, Life Through My Lens, Sarah, has had a very glamorous shot taken by Barrett Ehrlich, the photography tutor, in another way of kind of breaking stereotypes. Yes, this person is an attractive person, attractive woman in a glamorous shot, nicely dressed and everything, and to sort of break the stereotypes of weird looking people, disabled people, that kind of thing. So it's another way of breaking down these things, isn't it?
Yeah. You shouldn't have to do that, but it's one way of getting the message out there.
Yeah.
And it's very effective. And it's very inspirational as well.
Yeah, you shouldn't have to do it, but it is somebody who's comfortable with their own image. So why shouldn't they use their own image? You know, it sort of goes both ways, doesn't it?
The next one is from Christine Armstrong, who's a self-employed motivational speaker from Canada. And this is another quote. I shared one from last week. And it basically says, spend your time and energy uplifting and encouraging people, not tearing down people.
It's a nice quick share thing. But no, unless it's reshared regularly, it'll be one bobbing among the waves. Not all personalities will heed it.
What I like about it is it's short and effective, and it'll inspire a lot of people, and sometimes might even educate. The next one is from Effie Purple, and they're an artist, neurodivergent artist, multiple brain surgery survivor, a death-defying creator of colourful neurodivergent characters. And what they've shared is something quite humorous, I think. It's humorous, but it's not. I came, I saw, I overshared. I got convinced that everyone was secretly mad with me. I left and hid under my weighted blanket. Is that the power of overthought? Because I know I've been that way myself.
Removed secretly, I'm just convinced otherwise motivated and they're dynamic usually.
I think this oversharing thing, I mean, people should be oversharing, you know. That means that they're talking about real stuff. I think society condemns people for sharing things and talking about subjects that they should really be opening up and discussing and talking about.
I think it's just a defense mechanism in many ways. It's like some people feel that if they share too much, they leave themselves emotionally naked, and that means they've got nothing left. You know, it's like they feel they're going to be judged or criticised. Because I know I felt that way myself in many ways. If I share experience that maybe I'm a bit embarrassed about, even though they may not need to be embarrassed. You know, it's a strange one. It's the thing about overthinking it, as well as overfeeling it. But you're right, society doesn't, particularly encourage people to share. They particularly tell people to be quiet and get on with it. That particularly means that, particular certain cultures.
I think sharing is good for our mental health, isn't it? We're all supposed to be talking and thinking about our mental health and being honest about things, talking with each other, chaps talking together, that kind of stuff. And then suddenly people say, well, you're oversharing. It's contradictory.
Well, I think there is a counter to that, which is that if you overshare in situations where, say, you get chatting to someone at a bus stop, they are not emotionally prepared to hear about your childhood trauma. So when you share anything, you are expecting something of your conversation partners. To start talking about a topic that people might not be emotionally prepared to talk about at that time or ever, it puts a lot of expectation on the conversation recipient to take on somebody else's trauma story or something horrendous that happened. So I think although we shouldn't feel shy about sharing things, I think it's important to remember that the people we're talking to are also other human beings, and they may not have the capacity to deal with something very traumatic, something very gory, perhaps, something very frightening. So, yeah, I just think we have to remember that every interaction has at least two people in it. A good friend of mine always checks with me before, if she's going to talk about something that's quite heavy, she checks with me that I've got the capacity at that time to deal with that conversational topic. And if I haven't, it's okay to say, actually, I can't listen to this right now. I can't deal with you sharing this right now. And we'll come back to it. I think autistic people, we tend to miss the implicit sort of social guidelines of what topics are and aren't acceptable. So I think we're possibly prone to doing it a little bit more and maybe feeling accepted by a group of people and thinking, oh, it's okay, I can share this with these people, and then realizing that everyone's gone quiet and is staring at you and someone said, are you okay? That you've maybe crossed one of these unwritten lines in the social sound of what you can and can't say in certain situations. I think we maybe get a bit more carried away, for want of a better phrase, in sharing with people. I just think it's important to be aware of what you're talking about and with whom.
Yeah, I take your point. I think I've always erred on the side of pushing the boundaries.
I had to have this conversation with someone I was dating, and we'd met some other autistic people, and I could tell they were really uncomfortable about his topics of conversation. And I said, look, we'll see these people again, we'll meet up, we'll play board games, and it'll be fine. We had a nice time. I said, however, I think some of your topics of conversation were a bit much. He was like, what do you mean? But I'm just being positive about X, Y, and Z. I won't go into all the details. I said, but you don't know what experiences those people have had about the things you're talking about. They might not be, they might not be as open about things as you. They might not be as knowledgeable about certain things as you are. And they may not be comfortable with this topic of conversation. And I think it was a bit of an eye-opener for him. I was like, when you're talking, people are listening, and they are people with their own boundaries and their own areas of comfort.
Yes, I have. That just reminds me of the times where I used to go to like social groups. Not all of them were kind of autistic specific. It was like mental health groups and that as well. And I used to go in these wee rants, and often political, often just very judgmental about everything. And I used to not get pulled up, but used to get advised, just kind of be careful what you're talking about, because you don't know people's experiences of who you're talking to. You don't know them well enough, because these groups were basically these kind of social groups where you sit around a table and have a cup of tea and coffee with biscuits, and it's getting people out the house, and it's like a social group for people. It might be the only place they go to the whole week for them, and I'm all these rants about the state of the world and how I think things should be and all that. I remember sometimes sharing things like that is just, it's not appropriate, especially people you don't really know. So yeah, I can identify with that in many ways. The next one that I shared was basically celebrating, it's celebrating, but certainly just announcing that Autistic Radio has now reached the milestone of 100 likes under a year. And it was just thanking everyone for their support since we started this page.
Yeah, it's a bit of progress, and as you say, it's fairly short time. I mean, you see these Facebook pages with thousands and thousands of followers built up over years, but we're really niche, and it's an achievement because people are interested enough to want to know what we're saying next. And I think it's really cool that you're doing it.
This will be the last one. This is from Autistic Adventures Abroad. And it's basically sharing his 8-day spontaneous road trip through Oregon. We do podcasts with Alex Regis of Autism Adventures Abroad, and this is the sort of stuff that's great. It's like things aren't limited as you think. There's many things you can do, And just the title itself, my 8-day spontaneous road trip through Oregon, America, just sounds, it's not frightening to me, but sounds very interesting and very left field, certainly from my own lived experience.
I know that Alex is just at the moment organising tickets and planning his trip over to Australia. I just finished off his railway trip on Interrail, the recordings that I made with him about that just recently. And he said next stop is going off to Australia. So there's plenty going on, plenty of positive representation of an autistic person who's not being held back by autism.
That's actually quite a good end to the broadcast tonight. Thanks everybody for coming along. I really enjoyed the conversations that we had. It was quite a various kind of content that we went through there, and it's ended quite well. So this is Spectrum Voices Conversation, here every Sunday, 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. UK time, and 1 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, United States. So again, thanks everybody for taking part, and thanks for everyone for listening. Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.